Everything you love was once a project. The apps you tap, the bridges you cross, the shows you stream. None of them happened by accident. Behind every one of them was a dream, a team, and a project manager trying to hold it all together. I'm Rick Morris, and this is AI Driven PM, the show where project managers stop playing games, embrace reality, and use AI to make dreams come true without burning out their people. Each week, we'll blend real world project war stories with practical ways to put AI to work. How to plan smarter, negotiate better dates, protect your team, and focus on the work that actually moves the needle. If you ever thought there has to be a better way to do this, then you're in the right place. Let's get to work. This is AI Driven PM. Welcome back to the final episode of season 2 of AI Driven PM. This is episode 13. I'd like to say welcome back to you. I'm Rick Morris. We spent the last 3 episodes showing you what we built, right? Production AI agents running on real projects. That was Aria protecting projects from risk by turning organizational history into a living database. You have Atlas, which is building estimates with discipline using practice libraries and the PERT methodology. And we showed you Pace in the last episode, which measures sprint predictability and surfacing execution breakdowns before they become crises. All 3 of those agents operate at the project or team level. They help you execute the work you've already committed to. But today, we're going to go one level up to the portfolio. Because here's the hard truth. The biggest project management problem most organizations have isn't execution, it's intake. Now, I have over 150 implementations of project and portfolio management systems, and almost every single one of those, the organization wanted to get portfolio metrics. They wanted to buy it because they wanted to help understand intake and making these portfolio decisions. The problem is that the amount of data in order to make those decisions was insane. So I used to do a lot of work with CA Clarity, and Clarity had a very beautiful waterline view, and every executive who ever saw that view wanted it. And what it would do is it basically would, do statistical analysis and say, here's the waterline where you run out of capacity. Here's the projects you should do, the projects you shouldn't do. The problem is they can never trust the data or get the amount of data in necessary in order to make those decisions. And that was very difficult. This is where AI is really coming in and starting to help out, right? So every organization right now doesn't have an execution problem, really. They have an intake problem, specifically around their portfolio. They say yes to too many things. They commit to impossible dates. They overload their teams, and then they wonder why nothing finishes on time. I've never worked or seen an organization who doesn't have too many projects and not enough people to execute them. That's why portfolio management is so important. So let me introduce you to Gatekeeper, the agent I'm building to solve that problem. Let me paint you a picture of how project intake works at most organizations, right? First, a new idea comes in. Maybe it's from a C-level executive, maybe it's from a client, maybe it's from a product manager who's been sitting on this idea for the last 6 months, and someone says, we need to go do this, right? And then the question comes, well, how long is that going to take? And how much is that going to cost? And this is where it generally breaks down, right? The person asking doesn't want to hear 6 months. They want to hear 6 weeks because they've already told someone else it's probably going to be ready by then, to be honest, right? So you, the project manager, the delivery lead, the person who actually has to make it happen, you're put in this impossible position, right? You can tell the truth. This is a 6-month project and here's why. And you'll be told, well, that's unacceptable. Find a way to do it faster. How can we get this done in 6 weeks? That project didn't take that long. Or you could say, all right, 6 weeks, and you know it's not possible, but you say it anyway because the alternative is being labeled as not a team player, right? So the project gets approved, the date gets set, the team gets assigned, and 6 weeks later, you're nowhere close. You ask for more time, you get pushback. You said 6 weeks, right? Now you're managing a project that was doomed from the moment it entered the portfolio. I've seen this happen hundreds, if not thousands of times now in my career. And here's what drives me crazy, right? Nobody wants to have the hard conversation at the beginning. Nobody wants to say, hey, listen, we don't have capacity for this. Or nobody wants to say, if we commit to this, something else has got to slide, right? Nobody wants to say, Ben, the date you want is not aligned with the scope that you're describing. Like that's almost impossible. So the project gets started and the chaos begins. And that's where things generally happen. I remember one project in my career where we did this analysis and they said, what will it take to get this project done? And we said, yeah, by August. And they looked at me and they said, well, how do we get April? And this was my own firm. And so I was a little cheeky and I was like, I don't know, fairy dust, right? Like just capture Tinkerbell and like shake her really hard and see if we can generate 2 months out of thin air. And I swear to you, the guy looking across from me looked at me like, So you're saying there's a chance. And here's the reality. What we did is we put heavy, heavy, heavy assumptions on there. Every single one of those assumptions failed. Now, my team still delivered April and they still called us a failure because there's so many different things that were going wrong. And that project, to be honest with you, shouldn't have probably even been picked to start in the first place. There was way too much risk, way too much cost, and it really wasn't solving the real problem in the long run. And that's why traditional intake fails. Now, you might be thinking, though, but Rick, we have an intake process. We have a project request form. We have a governance committee. We do gates. We do all that stuff. But great. Let me ask you a few questions. First, of your gating process. My very first question I ask at any mature PMO is, how many projects have you killed? Because if you're not killing any projects, then that process is just worthless. I'm just telling you right now, like that process is not there, right? So when someone submits a project request, do they provide a realistic estimate of the effort required? Is it just a guess? When the governance committee reviews it, do they compare it against actual available capacity, or do they just assume the team's going to figure that out? Or when the executive sponsor says, I need this by Q2, does anybody push back and say, man, that's not possible given current portfolio load? Or do they just write down Q2? Because here's what I see with most intake processes. Requests are optimistic. Requesters underestimate scope because they don't know what they don't know, to be honest. And prioritization is political. The loudest voice generally wins. The project with the most senior sponsor gets approved regardless of ROI or strategic alignment. Capacity is ignored. Nobody's looking at the team's current workload and asking, do we actually have the bandwidth for this? Dates are arbitrary. Someone picks a date that sounds good, end of the quarter, before the conference, in time for this product launch. And then that becomes the target regardless of whether it's achievable. And the result? You approve 15 projects when you have capacity for 8. You commit to dates that require heroic effort, and you set your teams up to fail before they even start. That's not project management, man. That's project theater. So that's where the vision of Gatekeeper came. And this is what Gatekeeper is designed to do. Gatekeeper sits at the front of your portfolio before a project gets approved, before a date gets committed, before a team gets assigned. And Gatekeeper asks the hard questions that most humans will avoid, right? Based on the scope described, what's a realistic effort, a realistic estimate? She can pull from Atlas's practice libraries and apply PERT methodology. She can give you a range of optimistic, most likely pessimistic. Do we have capacity for this right now? She can look at current team utilization, ongoing projects, planned releases. She'll tell you if you're already at 110% capacity. What about if we commit to this project, what else has to move? She can surface the trade-offs. Like, you could start this in Q2, but project X will have to slip by 6 weeks. What risks does this project carry? She can run an ARIA style assessment. This looks similar to these historical projects which had those, recurring issues. Is this date achievable? She'll compare the requested date against the realistic estimate and tell you, like green is achievable, yellow, tight but possible, red, impossible without cutting scope or adding resources. And here's the kicker. Gatekeeper can produce a reality-based intake report that goes to the governance committee. And by the way, it's the agent saying it, not the human saying it. So you're not the team player, right? It's basically saying here is a true analysis based on everything that we know. And of course, that's going to get smarter over time. Now note a project request form that the requester filled out generally with hopeful numbers is what they have right now, right? And most of those, we don't ever go back to see if they were ever valid. We don't ever go back to see if it was really a right estimate in the first place. This becomes a data-driven assessment that says, here's what this actually costs. Here's how long it actually takes. Here's the capacity impact. Here's the risk profile. And here's whether or not this data is realistic. That report forces the conversation that maybe nobody really wants to have, but everybody needs to have. And that was the whole point of the gating process in the first place. So let me build the framework for you first, right? So Gatekeeper generally does have gates. That's exactly what we're trying to say. And it operates through these 4 gates. So every project request should pass through all 4 gates before it approves. So there should be a scope clarity, right? So the first question Gatekeeper asks is the scope clear enough to estimate? She can analyze the project request, and if it's vague, like we need to modernize the platform or improve customer experience, she can flag that. And she'll start asking clarifying questions like, What specific capabilities are included? What's in scope and what's explicitly out of scope? Are there dependencies or other projects or systems? What does success look like? Now, for most organizations that have some sort of a project intake form, that's what those forms were designed to do. But most companies or most people I know, they don't know how to fill it out, or they don't have enough information to fill it out, and they haven't been guided through an interview. And so they just kind of put in what they have, and then we, try to score it, and off we go. But in this case, if the requester can't answer these questions, the project doesn't move forward. And then what it'll do is actually go into a discovery required state. So you don't estimate what you don't understand. Now, this gate alone would stop half of the bad projects get approved every year, but Gatekeeper actually can walk them through an interview to help get to the numbers that we need to. So that's gate one. Gate two is a realistic estimation. So once scope is clear, Gatekeeper can estimate the effort. She can even pull from Atlas's practice libraries and apply the PERT methodology, look at optimistic, most likely pessimistic scenarios. And then she can produce a range, not a single number, right? So this project will take between 4 and 7 months with an expected value of 5.5 months. Now that range communicates the uncertainty, it sets realistic expectations, and it prevents the requester from hearing 4 months and ignoring the up to 7 months part, which is what generally happens. And if the requested date falls outside of that range, then Gatekeeper can flag it immediately, right? The requested date is not achievable given estimated scope. Now, the third gate is a capacity analysis. So Gatekeeper can look at the existing portfolio and ask, do we have capacity to execute this project? She can analyze the current team utilization. Our team's already at 90% plus capacity. What's the ongoing projects? What's in flight right now? Planned releases. Is there a hard deadline that lock capacity? Resource availability, or the right skills available? Or what would we need to hire a contract? This has always been the promise of your clarities and your plan views and your big systems. The problem is those were very deterministic, yes or no, based on data, but there wasn't probabilistic, which is where AI gets really, really good at being able to look at this and saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. But then Gatekeeper asks that next question to try to get this to absolutes. It's okay if you don't know. We say we don't know, but it starts to ask us additional questions to help us think so we can get to that better answer. And when she's done this, she can produce a capacity report. She can tell you the current portfolio loads 112% of available capacity, and adding this project would increase that to 127%. So maybe we delay this project into Q3, or we deprioritize project X over there to create capacity. This becomes that trade-off conversation, but Gatekeeper can make it explicit. And then finally, your fourth gate is your risk and ROI alignment. So Gatekeeper evaluates risk and return. She runs an ARIA-style risk assessment, and this project looks similar to these historical projects, which experience these levels of risks. And she compares the estimated effort against the expected business value. So if the project is high effort, high risk, and low value, she's going to flag it. Risk-adjusted ROI is before your portfolio or below your portfolio threshold. This gate prevents pet projects from sneaking through because somebody senior wants them. I mean, the data basically speaks. And at the end of the four gates, Gatekeeper can produce a portfolio intake report. This is what goes to the governance committee, and it's really just apples to apples. Here's what this thing includes. It has an executive summary, so it'll tell you the project name and requester and start and end date, all of that normal stuff. It'll tell you the estimated effort, and it'll tell you a gate status that it finds, like it's passing or failing these gates. It'll give you a recommendation of whether we approve, delay, or reject. That's the main section, right? And then it'll do essentially a scope assessment. So it'll give it a clarity score, what the key assumptions are, what are the dependencies that have been identified, what are the scope risks. It'll include the capacity impact, so the current portfolio load, impact of adding this project, trade-offs required, resource constraints, and then it has a risk profile. So it'll show you like the top 5 risks based on historical data, probability and impact scores, recommended contingency amounts, mitigation strategies. And then finally, the ROI and strategic alignment. So it'll show estimated cost, expected business value, risk-adjusted ROI, strategic alignment score, how well does this align with the organizational policies? And then, finally, it gives you a recommendation narrative, right? So this is where Gatekeeper will actually make the case. So for example, it could say the recommendation for this project is delayed to quarter 3, right? Project has clear scope and aligns with strategic priorities. However, current portfolio is at 112% capacity, and approving this project now would push three existing projects past their committed dates. So the requested end date of June 30th is not achievable given the estimated 5.5 month timeline and the earliest available start of April 1st. So the recommendation would be delay start to July 1st or Q3. This allows Project X to close, which frees capacity, and it gives you a revised end date of December 15th. So it'll tell you all of that. And that narrative then becomes defensible. It's not somebody's opinion, it's actually grounded in data. So here's what Gatekeeper changes for us, right? Right now, intake is a negotiation. The requester wants a date, the delivery team wants more time, they meet somewhere in the middle, and both sides know the compromise is unrealistic, but nobody says that out loud, right? We're almost starting each project with a lie. But with Gatekeeper, intake becomes an evidence-based decision. The data says what it says. Gatekeeper doesn't care about politics. She doesn't care who the sponsor is. She doesn't care if the CEO really, really wants it by Q2. She tells you, here's what's realistic, here's what's required, and here's the trade-off. And then leadership has to make a real decision. Do we delay the other projects to make room for this one? Do we cut scope to hit the date? Do we add capacity? Right? Do we accept that the date isn't achievable and reset expectations now? These are all the hard decisions that need to be made, but making them at intake is infinitely better than making them 6 months later when the project is failing. That's what Gatekeeper forces. The conversation that should happen, but usually doesn't. Now, I'd love to walk you through all of that stuff, but really, in trying to keep this podcast where I'm trying to keep it, I'm just going to show you a quick demo, but of course, we're going to take a commercial break right here. We'll come back and show you the results of a couple of quick conversations I had with Gatekeeper, just so you can get a feel of what that looks like.
In today's economy, leaders are looking for a different kind of consulting partner. A partner that will work with you to understand your culture, technology, and employees. A partner that will develop the solutions you need, not the solutions they know best. For us, it's never been about simply checking a box. Since we were founded in 1999, Centric Consulting has established a reputation for solving its clients' toughest problems by delivering flexible, tailored, cost-efficient solutions, all centered on the right outcomes for each business. It's all part of our mission to deliver an unmatched experience you won't get anywhere else. Centered on what's best for you, Centric is ready to guide you on the journey ahead.
And we're back. So let's go through Gatekeeper. I did a couple of quick examples of this so you can just see what the output is, and you can see how it starts to drive some of these decisions and some of these conversations. So in this first one, and again, these agents are deployable anywhere. I've got this as a skill in Claude just so that we can see what it looks like. So in Claude, I said, hey, basically Gatekeeper, I call it, right? I have this new project request received. It's the Phoenix platform modernization. We need to migrate the application from on-prem servers to AWS, refactor the monolithic architecture into microservices, and upgrade the database from MySQL 5.7 to PostgreSQL. Now this PostgreSQL. So this here is generally where most intake forms stop, to be fair, right? It's just, here it is. Maybe there's some like business value conversations or capacity things or stuff like that. But that's pretty much all the explanation you get for the project. So when I put that in, basically I got asked 4 questions. And those questions fed to me from Gatekeeper. It asked me like, where's the pressure coming from? What's the cost? What are some of these things? And I said, look, here's the things. But the main thing I said is that there was executive pressure. And it says, okay, so I see that there's cost pressure. I see there's an executive mandate. It's about medium effort, and there's all or nothing scope. So those were the questions it asked me. It was like, hey, is there a cost pressure? We said, yep, we'll probably save $100,000, I think is what I said. And then it says, where is this coming from? We said, it's an executive mandate. It's telling us that. It asked us what level of effort it was. I said it was about a medium level of effort. And they were like, can we break this up into chunks, or is this all or nothing? And I said, all or nothing, right? So it says, great, let me show you the math. And quickly it says, hey, the all or nothing bundle, the effort midpoint's already at $1.25 million from your medium range. So it already went out looked at practice libraries, got information, started to pull some median costs. And it says your Big Bang monolith to microservices plus replatform plus database swap sits at the high end of all of these different risk benchmarks. So there's a 50% chance this project's going to fail right out of the gate, right? Based on just these questions. And that's probably going to cost about $0.93 million in order to figure that out. And you only have an opportunity cost right now of $0.6 million for the displaced internal work. So judgment based until you name it is to break even. Phoenix needs $5.55 million per year in savings in order to make this a viable project. So right there, right? Just right there, the financially is saying, hey, listen, go find a better business case. Does this, answer this question more or less? This kind of stuff. Now it says, hey, listen, if you do scenario B, which is a phased lift and shift to AWS, then your break even drops to $1.22 million per year. It's still negative here, but that's starting to help, right? And so 3 challenges before this goes anywhere. First, the all or nothing framing. Second, the exec mandate. And third, the opportunity cost. So it starts to tell you what it needs to firm up. Right? Just that alone starts to turn you into this thinking partner to help us get at least better information to go sell this project. Now, that was just a quick example of just an early intake. Like I've just got an idea. What if I know less than that when we start the project? So I'll show you an example here now of walking through a project from the beginning. So here I just say, hey, please walk me through a new idea for a project that I have. And so it says, hey, Gatekeeper's here. I see your new idea. Let's see some of this stuff. And so I said, yep. And it asked, do you want to just do a quick or do you want to do a deep diagnostic? And I said, let's do a deep diagnostic. So it says, perfect. I'm going to ask you 10 questions, full net operating value math at the end. I'll give you a defendable go, no go, defer or MVP call. And since this is a client portfolio capacity, we'll treat the client's backlog as the opportunity cost pool. So it says, tell me a little bit about the idea. What problem does this solve? What happens if you do nothing? Now, again, just trying to speed it up, I had a bunch of clarifying questions and stuff that I already put in here. So like how many services will the monolith be broken into? What's the current size of the current database? And I'm like, we're going to do 8 microservices. Database is about 2 terabytes, 150 tables, so on and so forth. Just asked a bunch of stuff. Now, as soon as I put that in, it already said, hey, whoa, stop, right? So in that exchange, you answered me, but you didn't give me any value. What you answered me with is, what are we building? What you didn't answer for me or ask is, why are you building this? And that's what I need to know. So again, framing the conversation is completely different here. And the reaction to the information is going, I see the what, I don't know the why or what we get if we do this. So here it says, hey, listen, questions 1 or 2, platform modernization is what we could do if we don't do this. So that's it's a solution, not a problem. So what breaks? Cost money or blocks revenue, or why are we moving from this monolith? Also, the definition of done has no business outcome in it. So running at AWS performance equivalent or better with 0 downtime describes a successful migration, not a successful project. So it's saying, hey, help me with more information. It says specifically, you could hit all 3 criteria, create $0 of value. It's basically saying you can hit all of these criteria, but still create $0 of value, which is insane, right? So it doesn't mean this is a really good use of our time. It also says the timeline that we gave it fails the sniff test. So monolith to 8 microservices with 2 terabytes and 150 tables migrated. To do that in 3 months with a dependency on another team for environment provisioning, the industry pattern for this shape of work is about 9 to 18 months, right? So a 3-month ask tells me a VP has anchored on a date, not an estimate. Right? So that alone pushes failure probability into the 50 to 70% band, which will hit the risk cost line hard. So then it starts to ask me more questions. I give it more answers, and it starts to run the data. Now, at the end of running this data, it gets into all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, you know what? How can we go small, and how do we scope it to prove value? So it's like, okay, here we go. So it starts to put that in, starts to give me value. It basically says, hey, why don't we extract one of the 8 planned services, pick the domain with the worst deploy friction and the highest incident load, and that's where the value signal is strongest. Touch only its tables, likely 10 to 15 of the 150. No zero downtime requirement, no full 2 terabyte migration. So if we do 2 FTEs for 2.5 months at 15,000, and then we use our consultants that we were planning, that's about $150,000 spent. So basically, it's saying, listen, what it's saying is, let's do, if we miss, we spend $150,000 to avoid spending 1.1 million, right? And then we can turn around and go apply resources to app modernization, which would be the areas we could do if we didn't do this project. I created this decision, has all the math, and I said, all right, create this then a document for me where I could actually see this decision record and be able to present this to my executives. So it not only creates it, but it creates it branded. So it creates a really pretty document. It's like, here's the decision record on Project Phoenix, the date we ran it. It says, here's the decision: defer the full program, approve $150,000 single service pilot with gate criteria. Then it walks me through the NOV analysis, key findings, what the approved pilot's going to be, and what the open items are before we do a full program reconsideration. This is also done in one page, so it's just not on and on and on and on for executives. This is the power of Gatekeeper, and this is what we've been dying to be able to put in front of executives and portfolio committees that's really going to surface the real decision without all the politics. Now, the politics are still going to happen, but at least we got the information in front of them. So worst case scenario, they say, you know what, forget this, go do it in 3 months, do it for 1.25 million. Cool, right? Let's go try. And when we fail and they go, I can't believe we failed, we've got a document that told you we were going to fail. We've got a document that told you we would pilot. So maybe the next time we actually can start to get that through. Again, this is the power and the dream of Gatekeeper. Here's the hard truth about portfolio management. Most organizations do not have a capacity problem. They have a discipline problem. They know they're overloaded. They know they're approving too many projects. They know the dates are unrealistic, but they approve them anyway because saying no is hard, because disappointing a senior executive is uncomfortable, because we'll figure it out feels easier than having the fight at intake. And then they spend the next 6 months managing the chaos that they created. Gatekeeper can change that. Not because AI is smarter than humans, but because AI doesn't care about the politics. Gatekeeper will tell the CEO the same thing she tells a junior project manager. The data says this timeline isn't achievable. Here's what's required to make it happen. She doesn't negotiate. She doesn't soften the message. She doesn't say what people want to hear. She says what they need to hear. And that creates accountability. Because once the data is on the table, leadership can't pretend they didn't know. They can't blame the delivery team 6 months later for missing the date. They made a choice with full information and they own the outcome. That's what Gatekeeper does. She forces the hard conversation at the right time before commitments are made, before teams are burned out, before projects fail. This is absolutely the future. So let me bring this full circle. We started this season teaching you Socratic prompting, how to ask AI better questions, how to shape responses, how to make AI your thinking partner. And then we showed you what happens when you take that capability and build agents. Systems that don't just answer questions, they do the work. Aria protects you from risk by learning from history. Atlas builds estimates with discipline and evidence. Pace measures execution predictability and surfaces breakdowns. Gatekeeper forces reality-based portfolio decisions. These aren't research projects anymore. Aria, Atlas, and Pace are production. Gatekeeper is here, right? Gatekeeper is right in front of us. And here's what ties them all together. They amplify human judgment. They don't replace it. Aria doesn't decide which risks to mitigate. You do. She just gives you all the data. Atlas doesn't decide whether to approve an estimate. You do. She just builds the model. Pace doesn't decide whether to reduce sprint capacity. You do. She just shows you the trend. Gatekeeper doesn't decide which projects to approve. Leadership does. She just forces the conversation. This is what AI should be doing for project managers, not taking your job, making you better at your job. Now, I started my career 30 years ago, and I've spent those 30 years trying to help organizations deliver projects successfully. I've written 7 books. I've implemented 150 plus PMOs. I've taught thousands of project managers. I've built frameworks, methodologies, governance structures. And you know what I've learned? The tools really don't matter. The methodology really doesn't matter. The certifications, they really don't matter. What matters is, do you learn from your mistakes? Do you make decisions based on evidence? Do you protect your people from impossible commitments? That's what great project management looks like. It's servant leadership. And that's what AI finally lets us do at scale. ARIA is the lessons learned system I described in 2008, now actually possible. Atlas is the estimation discipline I've been teaching for 20 years, now automated. PACE is the execution accountability every agile team needs, now measurable. And Gatekeeper is the portfolio governance every executive claims to want, but now it's enforceable. The technology has finally caught up to the vision. So here's my challenge to you. Stop playing games with impossible dates. Stop pretending you have capacity you don't have. Stop repeating the same mistakes because nobody captured the lessons. Use AI to tell the truth. Use AI to force the hard conversations. Use AI to protect your teams. Because at the end of the day, we're not here to fill out forms and update trackers. We're here to make dreams come true. And you can't make dreams come true if you're drowning in chaos. Thanks for listening, gang. This has really been fun. It's been a great season. And it's been season 2 of AI Driven PM. So hopefully you take this advice. Hopefully you're in there playing with tools, building your own agents, and starting to realize what I am is to stop even being limited by your own thinking. Now, one last challenge for you. Go build something great. We really appreciate you listening to us. Maybe there'll be another season, maybe there won't. But at this point, we're going to conclude season 2 of AI Driven PM. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Rick Morris. I hope to see you again soon. I'm Rick Morris, and this has been AI Driven PM. Keep protecting your people, telling the truth, and making dreams come true.